On this video, we're going to be making custom suspension for the 67 Barracuda. So this is my car, and I've been looking around at different suspension options that you can buy as a bolt-on option, possibly, you know, just thinking maybe there's something out there. Well, there are some options out there. I looked at how some of the cars were done, the way they sat at ride height, and I just wasn't real pleased with the way they looked overall. We're going back to the drawing board. We're gonna figure out our own method of doing this front suspension. So originally, this car has torsion bar front suspension. Instead of coil springs or leaf springs, it's got torsion bars. And supposedly they handle pretty good. A lot of guys like it, but it has its limitations, and one of those is with a coilover spring you get a little bit better adjustability with ride height, but there's not a lot of bolt-in options for that. So for starters, this Barracuda is a unibody car, which also has its pros and cons. There's no chassis that unbolts, so that's kind of a con, I guess, but they're also pretty stout cars. You know, the sheet metal on them is pretty thick, being a Mopar and everything. In this case, this car is really solid. So what we've already done in the back is we've done frame rail connectors or subframe connectors to tie it all together so that it's more rigid, kind of like a frame. But up here, the front suspension, it's not easy to just improve without getting drastic. So I didn't like some of the kits that were available that bolted in. They made the car sit too high. And the other thing we're doing is we're putting a big block 440 Mopar in this car. So I knew that, and so I looked around online and I found a radiator, big block radiator that bolted right into this car with the big block fan shroud that bolted right into this car. Motor mounts bolted right in. Transmission still fits, bolts right in. Everything bolts in and lines up if you stick to the original platform, the original engine location. So the reason I say that is, another weird thing about Mopars is the engine is offset 2 inches to the passenger side. So we're gonna keep the engine, transmission, driveline pretty much in the stock configuration. That way we can use all of those bolt-in parts still. It'll still fit under a factory hood without cutting a hole in the hood. It gets really close. It's like that close to the hood. So, but what we gotta do, so we basically got to get all the parameters in place, get the engine in place, factory location, and then reverse engineer a custom Crossmember that's going to work with our, you ready for it, Mopar guys? Mustang 2 suspension. So yes, we're using Mustang 2 style suspension. Now this isn't directly off of a Mustang 2. This is the hot rod version of a Mustang suspension that has evolved over the decades. No, I just started out with a cheap China kit off of eBay. I don't even remember the name brand, but started with the control arms, which they'll be just fine for what we're doing here. The spindles, with these spindles we'll be able to upgrade to bigger bare brakes, which I already have the bare brakes for this. And this also allows us to convert the steering from a gearbox to a power steering rack and pinion. Now, in my experience, I've learned my lesson not to cheap out on the rack and pinion. So we ended up going with a Detroit Speed Engineering narrowed rack and pinion, which I've used before. It works really good on these narrower cars. This Barracuda's got a pretty narrow track width. And well, actually, the original track width may have been wider, but because I'm wanting to tuck the wheels in to my liking, we're gonna put the control arms where I want it. We're gonna put this rack where I want it. And so this narrower rack allows me to have that adjustability and be able to sit the car lower and still turn within the wheel wells. Now this is a little bit of a challenge because we're doing something that no man has done before. We're reinventing the wheel. We're adding Ford parts to a Mopar. We've even got a Ford 9-inch in this bad boy. So we'll show you that later. So on this project, well, actually all projects that we do here at Hammer Fab and my own personal stuff, you know, getting the look is one of the most important things. And what we do here is we don't just take a stock car and slap some store-bought wheels on it and hope that they look right. And if they don't look right, well, that's as good as we can get. No, we're not doing that. So we'll do whatever it takes to get the wheel and tire fitment, the stance, the backspace, the dish, the concave on the wheels. We'll do whatever we need to do to get that look just right. And so if that means re-engineering the front suspension, so be it. That's what we're doing. And so, for example, on these wheels, I wanted this wheel, but I didn't want to be limited with a silly looking offset. So basically, I ordered the wheels and tires first, the sizes that I want with the backspace that I want, and then we built the rear end to fit the rear wheels. So it has a nice deep dish with a concave center, and we did the same on the front. And now we're basically backing in to our track width to fit these wheels. So it's a little bit backwards of how most people do it. It's a lot of work, but that's the details that we're after here. We're gonna nail the look, and it's gonna look right in the end, and everybody's gonna wonder why it looks so right, and it's because it's a lot of work. What we have to do here is basically start from scratch. You gotta position this stuff. First you buy the components, you position them off of the ground. We're using the ground as kind of our base plane, and we're literally using wooden blocks, in this case, to stack the lower control arms up at the correct height. So basically what you have to do is you get the spindle bolted to the wheel, you get the lower control arm level with the ground, and you space it up with some blocks. And then we'll set the car down over it, get it to look right. We have to kind of cut some brackets off of the existing car, figure out where the upper control arm is going to mount and how we're going to do that. We have to figure all that out. Nobody's made that for us. So that's kind of what we're doing today. So we've got the lower control arms jigged together so that they're the correct track width now and they're square with one another. But now we've got to edit where the rack and pinion is mounted in relation to the lower control arms. And our goal is to get all of this so that we can tack weld it to the subframe of the car so that we can do some 3D scanning, and then we'll put it in the computer and reverse engineer it and laser cut it and build it. All right, so we're putting a big block 440 in this car. It's been just kind of something that I've wanted to do. I've wanted one of these Barracudas for a while. I used to ride to school in one of these with my neighbor. His didn't have a big block in it, but you know, we'd always talk about how cool it would be to have a big block in it. So now we're doing it. It fits in here, kinda. So we're scrapping the original K-member that holds all the suspension. We're unable to use that. There's too many variables that just don't work out in this situation. So we have to eliminate it and make a new one. And our goal is to try and make it bolt into the same spot, possibly turn it into a product for those of you out there wanting to do something similar to this. If we can get this figured out where it's fairly straightforward, which it may not be, then we might offer part of this kit or all of it at a future date. So stay tuned for that. One of the things that we had to change though on this in order to make this happen was the oil pan. And so the original Barracuda oil pan, the main sump or the oil catch section of it was further up. It was like up here, and then the K-member went around it like this. Well, that's not going to work in our situation because of the rack and pinion steering. The rack has to go right through the middle here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can't bend the rack, you can't curve it around. It has to go right through the middle. So what do? You start hoping that somebody else makes a oil pan that bolts on and fits, or you have to make a custom oil pan. Thankfully, did a little research, and Dodge trucks happen to have a really thin front oil pan with the sump in the back. So I found one online, brand new. They were not cheap, and bought it, and it has the rear sump tube that already bolts up and everything. So mechanically, functionality, we're good to go in that regard. But the other thing is you got to be mindful of ground clearance. With this big of a sump, you can't really get the car that low. So really the biggest challenge of this whole project, putting a big block in a small car, is ground clearance, getting the ride height to look cool while still having enough ground clearance and hood clearance. So we're trying to not cut a hole in the hood. We want at least 3.5, 4 inches of ground clearance here and not look stupid when it's sitting at ride height. That's our goal. All right, so we started doing some fabrication on this, just trying to figure out what are we up against, what do we got to change, what are our limitations. So since the engine is offset 2 inches to the passenger side, I started doing the work on the passenger side, because knowing if I can get it to work over here, the other side will be a breeze, because we got 2 more extra inches of clearance for exhaust, steering, engine mounts, all the things. So basically, I've already got some of those things figured out ahead of time. One of the things is figuring out where the upper control arm is going to mount. But first, even before that, you got to cut all of the old brackets off and create a slick frame here. So that I've done that. And then also I had to cut a hole in the inner fender so that I could get the upper control arm through there, because it has to be really close to the engine block now. The other thing you have to kind of figure out is what kind of exhaust you're going to do, because headers, I don't know. I guess you either got to make a custom set of headers in this situation, because there's not a lot of options for big block headers to fit this car. Actually, I don't think there's any. You either got to make custom headers, or what I've chosen to do is found some original cast iron manifolds. They're not, I don't think they're even for a Barracuda. I don't remember what they're off of. They are big block, obviously. And I've even had to do some figuring out. So basically both of these cast manifolds are the same side to side, where normally they're not. I got 2 of the same one and just flipped one around. And so basically on this side, the exhaust is going to exit the back. On that side, the exhaust is going to come out the front and then circle back. You can see here, I also had to cut the original flange off and weld it on a stainless pipe bend right here. And I had to kind of do that at the last minute, because this upper control arm bushing is right in the way of where the original exhaust manifold was. I wanted the look of the original exhaust manifolds. I know they're not probably the best performance upgrade, which I don't really care about. We're gonna make up for it with some horsepower on the other end, with some big blockness. But I wanted that look. So when you pop the hood, I want it to look like kind of a factory looking engine bay, factory looking air cleaner, factory colors, things like that. So that's why I went with that. You know, they'll work fine. We've actually high temp coated them with some Zybar cast gray finish. So that stuff holds up really well. We've used that on other builds. It works really good. And then the other thing I like to do on these is add a V-band clamp for the exhaust. That way there's no exhaust leaks that enter into the cabin of the car. Let's see what else. So once we get that hole cut in there, well, we're gonna do this same stuff to the other side so you guys will get to see it. Once we get that, basically I've already got it, the geometry figured out on this side. So we just gotta copy it, put it on the other side, and then we've got most of the lower suspension jigged up right now. Once we get the top done, we can lower the car down onto the jig, bolt it all up, tack weld the jig to the suspension, or to the unibody, raise it up, do some 3D scanning. So that's our goal for this video. So let's get to it. Well, I chopped a hole in there. I'm gonna have to fix that. I got a little too aggressive with the air hammer. Okay, nothing on the back side is really important. The block that's in there is just a mock-up block, so if we hit it with this blade, it's no big deal. Oh. Well, that blade's done. It's already got weak. I got a 1/4 inch left to get. Ta-da! Step one. All right, now we just got to grind down some of these rough edges. We'll just kind of chop the top smooth a little bit with a grinder. We'll worry about this hole later. We'll come back and fill that up later. There is some stuff on the back side here that we got to scab off of there. And then we can put that upper control arm plate, position it in relation to the other side. And then we'll be really close to rigging up the front suspension. All right, that's close enough for now. We'll come back and fix that hole later. We'll come back and cut this off later and cut that off later. That's not important right now. Main thing is we need to get the inside of this slick and most of this stuff out of the way so we get a hole through there. Now we can mock up that inner plate, tack weld it into place, and then install the front suspension. All right, now we're gonna measure this control arm mount, which I've already got tacked in there. I know you can't see any welds right now. There's a tack weld on the bottom, and probably need to tack it a little better. Actually, I think I've got one on this side. Yeah, there's tack welds in here, so that's good. That's good enough. But what I need to do now is put this one in the same place as that one in relation to something. I'm thinking to measure off the core support here. You know, so off the... So it's like 20 1/4. Now I need a pin. That one's bent. That side's bent a little bit. Let me do that again. Yeah, 20 1/4 is good. I'm gonna go off of this one, 20 1/4. Actually, it should be right in the center of that mount. Now we're gonna take this control arm upright plate. Now this is not the final rendition. It's not the final product. This is a part that I had designed already for another vehicle. So I already had it designed in the computer, ready for laser cutting. So I just ordered 2 more, hoping that, you know, since I'm doing the similar style suspension, that I could maybe utilize these for mock-up like we're doing right here. So the goal is we're just gonna temporarily use these because they're beefy. They have threads in them. We can bolt the upper control arm to them and hold them in the correct location. And then while we scan everything, and then after we scan everything, we may end up using these, but we may just use a different version of these that better suits the overall design. So these are just temporary. All right, now we're gonna tack that there, and then we'll put a couple of tacks in here on this upper edge. Well, I gotta go get a welder now. We're ready to tack. So we want to put our tack welds in a place so that they're easy to cut off later, because we may or may not be using this in the end. Now we can bolt the upper control arm to that mount and raise the suspension up and start looking at tacking the suspension to the unibody structure. So I got to put it together a little bit. There should be 2 shims somewhere. Pretty sure I already had those set aside. Oh wait, you know what? We just got to take off about 3/16 of an inch off these bushings. These are basically going to be placeholders for future shims on the upper control arms. That's pretty close. You don't have to be exact. All right, now let's just use a file. Chamfer that a little bit. All right, now we're gonna make that one match that one. I like these because they got a little snap ring slot for the boot. All right, and then these thread in. So this is, I don't believe Fords are originally this way. It's Ford Mustang 2 geometry supposedly, but not really. This is I believe a Chrysler ball joint. It's a conglomeration of many years of street rod engineering. Chrysler ball joint, Mustang 2 style suspension, but not really. Also that we can build cool stuff. Okay, let's go over here. All right, now this is gonna go around the back side. Let's see. All right, I gotta do bolt, then spacer, then thread it in. Okay, bolt, then spacer, and thread it in. All right, so that plate that we just tacked on there, it's already got the anti-dive angle built into it, and that's really important for braking, the way the car reacts when you're braking. So, and it helps with steering axis inclination. We got to cut that thing out of there, because that's right in the way. We just got to chunk that out of there real quick. Look at that, it's gonna just barely clear the steering shaft. It's gonna be good. All right, now we're ready to clean up this mess a little bit, and then we'll lower the car down on the suspension. So now what we've got to do is lower the car down, check for some clearances here and there. I'm pretty sure that this cross member under here, this temporary cross member, is going to hit the oil pan. So we're going to have to notch that a little bit, fabricate a new connecting piece down lower so that we can get the oil pan as close to the rack and pinion as possible. So that's one thing we got to do. And then also I've got the rack and pinion mocked up, but it needs to be over about another inch to the right. I just bolted it up in the wrong spot, so because we haven't created that cross member yet, so we just got to drill a couple new holes and get the rack and pinion more that way. That's going to help us out with our steering and everything. So yeah, let's notch that, and then once that's done, we'll be able to hook up the upper control arms. All right, now we're gonna go cut this into a couple of pieces so that they do that number, but we only need them about that long, so, and then we'll attach the bar across the bottom. Let's go over to the bandsaw. Go cut that. All right, now I gotta line up those control arms again. Okay, so now I just gotta scoot the whole, basically scooting that whole apparatus forward to get the wheel to look right in the opening here. And that will come right back to my caster angle. Got about 6 degrees of caster built into it. Does that look good? In theory, that should all lift up with the car now. It worked. All right, now we just got to hook up the tie rods for now. Really, I need to shift this over, but for time's sake for today, we're gonna do some 3D scanning. And the only thing left I gotta do is basically move this rack over about an inch to the driver's side. Actually, I guess we could do that. We could do it, yeah, we could do that right in place. I think, yeah. We can do it right there without taking everything apart.
A ton more space.
Yeah. There. Now I just got to drill these holes over about an inch. See, this is all wonky too. That's all twisted. This is just temporary, but it's all wonky because these are, see this one. There, is that better? Is that square? Is that better? We're not gonna leave it MDF, trust me. Okay. All right, folks, that's just gonna get us close for scanning. It doesn't have to be perfect because I can fix it in the computer. Stay tuned next time. We're gonna show you how to bolt this bad boy in. And if it starts buzzing at you a whole bunch, I just pause it. Because if you start jumping around too fast, it starts overlapping things and getting all crazy. Now a lot of that gold stuff